I'm Sophia, 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my entire family decided I wasn't worth keeping around anymore. My parents sent a group message saying, "We think it's best if you step back from operations for now." My Aunt Patricia reacted with a thumbs up emoji. I stared at that little blue thumb for a full minute before typing back, "Understood. I'll respect that decision and step back from the family investment fund as well." That night, I initiated the withdrawal of my entire contribution. At 2:47 in the morning, my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. 73 missed calls by dawn. My father left a panicked voicemail asking what happened and why the bank had frozen everything. I simply replied, "I'm honoring your decision." That was before they discovered everything else I controlled. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy stories about families learning the hard way that respect isn't automatically given. The Sterling family wasn't just any family from Chicago. We were the Sterlings, a name that commanded respect in financial circles throughout the Midwest. Our family business, Orley Financial Advisors, had been operating for 3 generations, built from the ground up by my grandfather during the economic boom of the 1950s. I grew up watching my father, Robert Sterling, expand what my grandfather had created into something truly impressive. Our 7-bedroom estate in Lincoln Park was a testament to our success. Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with awards and photographs of my parents shaking hands with governors, senators, and Fortune 500 CEOs. My mother, Diana, was the perfect executive wife who hosted elaborate dinner parties where multi-million-dollar deals were negotiated over her legendary chocolate souffle. From childhood, I displayed a natural talent for numbers that surprised everyone around me. While my cousins played video games, I was fascinated by the financial reports my father would spread across his home office desk. By age 9, I was asking sophisticated questions about market volatility that sometimes stumped my father. This created an uncomfortable dynamic that would shadow me well into my professional career. Despite graduating summa cum laude from Northwestern with a double major in finance and international economics, my family still treated me like the little girl who needed constant guidance. When I joined Orley Financial at 23, my father placed me under the supervision of my cousin Brandon, who had barely scraped through his business degree at a community college in Wisconsin. "You need to understand how we operate in the real world, sweetheart," my father explained, patting my shoulder in that condescending way that made my skin crawl. "Brandon has been here longer and understands our company culture." He had been there exactly 8 months longer than me. Over the following 7 years, I quietly transformed into the firm's most valuable asset. My investment strategies consistently outperformed market averages by 8 to 11% when industry leaders were celebrating 3% gains. Clients specifically requested meetings with me, though my father frequently took credit for my team's achievements during board presentations and client dinners. The family investment fund was separate from our business operations, a $14 million collective that family members contributed to for everything from new ventures to luxury vacation properties. My personal contribution had grown to $4.7 million over the years, representing nearly 34% of the total pool. What none of my family members knew was that I had been systematically building my own independent investment portfolio since graduate school. While they spent summers at their lake house in Michigan, I was meeting with startup founders and venture capitalists in downtown Chicago. While they purchased luxury vehicles and designer clothing, I was acquiring minority stakes in emerging biotechnology companies and renewable energy startups. Last Christmas, my Uncle William raised a toast to the Sterling family tradition where everyone contributes equally and shares rewards fairly. The entire family cheered enthusiastically, despite the fact that my division had generated 68% of the company's profits that fiscal quarter. I smiled and raised my champagne glass while mentally calculating how much longer I could tolerate this charade. Monthly family meetings were held in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of our downtown offices. I would present comprehensive market analyses and growth projections, only to have my Uncle Richard interrupt with dismissive comments like, "That's very technical, Sophia, but what's your father's opinion on this?" My mother would often corner me afterward with well-intentioned but incredibly patronizing advice. "Honey, men don't appreciate women who sound too intelligent in meetings. You need to let your father and uncles feel important and valued." My Aunt Patricia, the woman who had enthusiastically endorsed my removal from operations, had never worked a single day at Orly Financial. Yet she sat on our advisory board and received the same profit distributions as those of us working 70-hour weeks. She had perfected the art of claiming credit for other people's ideas, particularly mine. I remember when Sophia mentioned international diversification. She announced during one memorable meeting, "I've been thinking we should definitely explore European markets." This was exactly 3 weeks after I had presented a detailed European expansion strategy that had been postponed for further consideration. My cousin Madison was the only family member who seemed to recognize what was happening to me. During a private lunch, she confided, "They treat me the same way, but it's worse because I don't have your financial expertise to make them money. They just want me to marry someone who will be useful to the business." Despite everything, I remained loyal to my family. I genuinely believed that eventually my contributions would be recognized and properly valued. I continued channeling my talents into growing our collective wealth while secretly building my own financial safety net. By my 31st birthday, my personal investments had quietly grown to $19.3 million, a fact I kept completely confidential. I purchased a stunning penthouse in River North under a limited liability company rather than my own name, and renovated the home office with cutting-edge financial technology. I assembled a small, highly skilled team who worked exclusively for me, all bound by strict non-disclosure agreements. I secured patents for several proprietary financial algorithms I had developed during my so-called free time. I never displayed my success publicly. I drove a reasonable car, lived modestly by sterling family standards, and showed up at Augerly Financial every day to generate profits for people who consistently undervalued my contributions. Some people might call it strategic patience. Others might call it avoiding confrontation. Either way, that approach was about to change dramatically. The monthly planning session 3 weeks ago started exactly like every other meeting. Our extended family gathered in the boardroom with my father positioned at the head of the table like some corporate king. I had prepared an extensive presentation on a revolutionary investment approach that could potentially increase our high net worth clients' returns by 15%. As I distributed my carefully researched reports, my cousin Brandon strolled in 20 minutes late, carrying nothing except a coffee cup and his smartphone. "Sorry I'm running behind," he announced without any genuine remorse. "I was just finishing up a call about the Morrison account." The Morrison account was actually my client, but I had asked Brandon to participate in one preliminary phone conference while I completed these quarterly projections. My father's face lit up with approval. "No worries, son. Client relationships always take priority. Why don't you update us on how that situation is developing before Sophia gets into all her charts and numbers?" Just like that, the first 30 minutes of our meeting were dedicated to Brandon taking full credit for 6 months of my work with the Morrison family. I sat in silence, watching my relatives nod approvingly as Brandon misrepresented crucial elements of the investment strategy I had personally developed. When it was finally my turn to present, I had barely advanced to my second slide when Uncle Richard cleared his throat with obvious impatience. "This all seems unnecessarily complicated," he said, not bothering to hide his dismissive tone. "Our clients trust the Sterling name because we keep things straightforward and reliable." Aunt Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. All these algorithms and technical strategies just confuse people. They want simple, proven approaches. I took a measured breath. Actually, our client feedback surveys indicate they're specifically seeking more sophisticated investment approaches. The market has evolved significantly, and if we don't adapt, we'll start losing accounts to firms that are embracing these innovative methodologies. My father drummed his fingers on the polished table, a signal I'd learned meant he was growing impatient. Sophia, theory is one thing, but we deal with practical realities here. This isn't theory, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. I've already implemented this approach with the Patterson portfolio as a pilot program. They've seen a 16% return in just 2 quarters. There was a moment of surprised silence before my father responded with obvious irritation. You implemented this without proper authorization. That's not how we operate here. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. I discussed it with you 2 months ago. You said to handle the Patterson account however I thought best since it was underperforming. I certainly didn't authorize the complete strategic overhaul. Though we both knew he had barely listened during that conversation, distracted by a basketball game on his office television. Brandon jumped in eagerly. I actually have a simpler approach we could consider. He had no materials prepared, no research, not even basic notes. Yet for the next 25 minutes, the family listened attentively as he essentially repackaged ideas I had presented last year, missing key components that would actually make them viable. Now that's the kind of clear thinking clients expect from the sterling name. My father said proudly when Brandon finished his improvised presentation, "Let's develop Brandon's approach for next quarter." After the meeting, I attempted to speak with my father privately in his corner office. "Dad, I'm genuinely concerned about the direction we're taking. The strategy Brandon proposed has significant gaps that could expose our clients to substantial risk." My father was scrolling through sports highlights on his phone. "Sophia, you're too focused on minor details. This business was built on relationships and instinct, not just spreadsheets and computer models." "But the spreadsheets and computer models are what keep us compliant with federal regulations and actually growing client wealth," I pointed out. "You know what your problem is? You've never fully embraced the family approach to business, always thinking your expensive education makes you smarter than everyone else." I was genuinely stunned. That's not true at all. I've dedicated my entire career to this family business. And we appreciate that, sweetheart, but sometimes you need to remember that you're still learning how things work in the real world. I was 31 years old, managing over $400 million in client assets, with a performance record that had helped triple the firm's valuation in 7 years. And I was still learning. As I left his office, I overheard Aunt Patricia talking to Uncle William in the break room. "Sophia's presentations give me such a headache," she was saying. "All those charts and complicated terminology, like she's trying to make the rest of us feel incompetent." Uncle William agreed. "The girl doesn't understand our family culture. Never has." I quietly stepped away, a cold realization settling in my chest. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge what part of me had always suspected. I would never be fully respected in this family business, regardless of what I contributed or achieved. That evening, instead of joining the family for our traditional post-meeting dinner, I went home to my penthouse and began systematically reviewing my personal financial affairs. I confirmed that all my independent business activities were properly separated from family assets. I verified that my patents and intellectual property were securely registered in my name alone. I reviewed contracts to determine which relationships were legally tied to me personally rather than the firm. I wasn't planning anything specific yet, but something fundamental had shifted, and I knew I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. The following week brought a series of subtle slights and dismissals that might have gone unnoticed before, but now felt like deliberate provocations. During a client presentation, my father interrupted my explanation of a tax optimization strategy to translate it into plain English, essentially oversimplifying my advice to the point of being misleading. At a staff development session, Brandon presenting one of my risk assessment frameworks as his own innovation. Aunt Patricia conveniently forgot to include me in the email distribution for an important family business planning discussion. Then came what I now recognize as the final breaking point. I arrived early at the office on Wednesday to prepare for a crucial meeting with our most valuable client, only to discover the meeting had been rescheduled and was already underway. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see my father, Brandon, and two other family members presenting to clients I had worked with for 5 years. I stood frozen in the hallway, watching as they displayed presentation slides I had created. As the clients nodded with obvious approval, my father and Brandon exchanged satisfied glances, clearly pleased with their successful presentation of my work. Later that afternoon, I learned they had also scheduled a strategic planning retreat for the upcoming weekend at Uncle Richard's estate in Lake Forest. Every member of the family leadership team was invited, except me. That night, I sat in my home office until nearly midnight, staring at my computer screen but not really processing what I was seeing. Years of memories cycled through my mind. All the times my ideas had been dismissed only to be celebrated when presented by someone else. All the extra hours I had worked to prove my worth. All the growth I had created for a family that would apparently never see me as an equal. Enough, I whispered to the empty room. Whatever happened next, I knew I was finished being undervalued and overlooked. The game was about to change completely. 3 days later, on Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from our family WhatsApp group. My father had created this group 18 months ago as a more efficient way to communicate about business matters, though it had mostly become a platform for sharing golf scores and vacation photos. The message from my father read, "After a considerable discussion among the senior family members, we think it would be best if Sophia steps back from client operations for now. We appreciate her analytical work, but recent feedback suggests clients respond better to our traditional Sterling approach. This isn't permanent, just an opportunity to realign with our family values." I stared at the screen, watching as responses began appearing almost immediately. Uncle Richard, completely agree. Smart decision. Aunt Patricia, endorsed. This is what's best for everyone. Cousin Brandon, happy to help transition her account smoothly. My mother, we only want what's best for the family business. 2 other cousins added their own supportive responses within minutes. Not one person objected, not one person even questioned what client feedback they were referencing, which was revealing since I personally managed our client satisfaction surveys and knew our ratings were exceptional. I felt an unexpected sense of calm as I watched this digital dismissal unfold. After years of trying to prove my worth, after all the revenue I had generated, after all the growth I had created for them, this was how it ended. A group text removing me from my position without even the courtesy of a private conversation. I waited exactly 19 minutes before responding, during which time several more affirmative messages appeared from various family members, including some who had previously claimed to support me during office disagreements. Finally, I typed, "Understood. I'll respect that decision and step back from the family investment fund as well. Wishing everyone continued success." Short, professional, and containing a nuclear bomb they didn't yet comprehend. I placed my phone face down on my desk and opened my laptop. Then I logged into the banking portal for our family investment fund. As a major contributor and one of the fund administrators, I had complete access to the account. The withdrawal process was surprisingly straightforward. A few clicks to initiate the removal of my entire contribution, $4.7 million, plus the proportional share of growth attributable to my investments within the fund, which added another $2.1 million. The system prompted me to confirm the transaction. I clicked yes without hesitation. I then composed a formal email to our family attorney, documenting my withdrawal from the fund and citing the specific section of our family agreement that allowed major contributors to exit with proper notice. I blind copied myself on a separate email account for documentation purposes. The family fund had always maintained a liquidity requirement, keeping at least 45% of assets in readily accessible accounts to allow for quick deployment when investment opportunities arose. This meant my withdrawal wouldn't fail due to insufficient liquid assets, but it would immediately and dramatically alter the fund's structure and investment capacity. Our banking system was configured to notify all administrators of any transaction exceeding $25,000. I was counting on the fact that most family members were enjoying their Friday evening and wouldn't check those notifications until much later, if at all. With that completed, I sent a brief email to my private team, informing them of upcoming developments and scheduling a meeting for Monday morning. I then went to my home safe and retrieved all the essential documents I had carefully organized over the years: copies of patents, client contracts with personal service clauses, documentation of my independent business entities, and evidence of which investment strategies were legally mine rather than the firm's. I made myself a cup of tea and settled into my living room, looking out at the Chicago skyline as evening settled over the city. Part of me felt a twinge of sadness about the bridge I was burning. These were, after all, the people I had grown up with, worked alongside, and tried to please for my entire adult life. But a stronger part of me felt something else entirely: liberation. The constant pressure to prove myself, to swallow insults, to watch less qualified people take credit for my innovations was finally over. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be the overlooked daughter desperately trying to earn a seat at a table that had been designed to exclude me from the beginning. My phone started buzzing around 8:15 in the evening. I glanced at it briefly to see several WhatsApp notifications and text messages from various family members, but I didn't read any of them. Instead, I ordered my favorite Thai food, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, and gave myself permission to enjoy my Friday night. At exactly 11:23, my phone rang with my father's distinctive ringtone. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately, then again. On the 5th consecutive call, I turned my phone off completely. I slept better that night than I had in months. When I powered my phone back on at 7:30 Saturday morning, I had to wait several minutes for all the notifications to finish loading. 58 missed calls, 142 text messages, 37 WhatsApp messages, 19 voicemails. I made myself coffee and toast before listening to any of them. The first voicemail, timestamp 11:24 Friday night. Sophia, it's Dad. Call me immediately about this fund situation. There must be some kind of error. The second, timestamp 11:47. Sophia, this is completely unacceptable. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way to handle it. Call me back right now. The messages grew increasingly frantic throughout the night. By the 2:47 voicemail, my father's voice had lost its anger and taken on naked panic. What happened? The bank has flagged everything as suspicious activity. The entire fund is frozen. You need to call me back immediately. The most recent message from 6:15 that morning was different. My father's voice was quieter, with a tone I'd rarely heard from him. Genuine uncertainty. Sophia, I don't understand what's happening here. Whatever we did to upset you, this seems like an extreme response. The family fund is completely locked down. The bank needs your verification to unfreeze the accounts since you initiated the transaction. Please call me back. Please. I finished my coffee, took a long shower, and dressed in my favorite navy blue suit that had always given me confidence. Only then did I send a single text message to my father. I'm honoring your decision. You asked me to step back, and I have. I've withdrawn my personal contribution as permitted under Section 7.3 of the Family Fund Agreement. The bank freeze is standard protocol for large transactions and will resolve once they complete verification. I've already submitted my documentation. Within 30 seconds, my phone rang. I declined the call. Then I sent one additional text. I'll be available to discuss this Monday at 9 a.m. at my home office. The address has been emailed to you. I turned off notifications and prepared to enjoy my weekend, knowing that across the city, my family was just beginning to understand what I had done and that this was only the beginning. What I hadn't told my family was that I had a contact at the bank. Nothing improper that would violate banking regulations, but Sandra and I had attended Northwestern together, and she now worked as a senior manager at the institution handling our family fund. She couldn't share confidential information, but she did call me Saturday afternoon with obvious amusement in her voice. Your family is creating quite a scene down here. Your father has called 4 different departments this morning. Your uncle showed up demanding to speak with the bank president. I apologize for that. I replied. Don't be, Sandra said. From what I can see, everything you did was completely legitimate. The freeze is standard anti-fraud protocol when a significant percentage of a large fund is withdrawn suddenly. I understand, I said, and I've submitted all documentation proving my entitlement to those funds. Which is why it should resolve by Monday, she confirmed, though I doubt that will calm them down before then. She was absolutely right. Through various notifications that kept appearing despite my efforts to block them, I caught glimpses of the family crisis unfolding. My phone would light up with message previews. Uncle Richard, this is financial sabotage. She can't just... Aunt Patricia, I always said she was too emotional for business decisions. Cousin Brandon, what about the Richardson deal we were counting on those funds for? My mother, Sophia, honey, please, just talk to us. We can resolve this. By Saturday evening, the tone of messages had shifted from outrage to desperation. The family had apparently begun calculating the full implications of my withdrawal. The Richardson deal Brandon mentioned was a $25 million commercial development project the family had been planning to invest in. The fund would have provided the required down payment with traditional financing covering the remainder. Without my portion, they were now significantly short of the necessary cash, and the bank freeze meant they couldn't access even the remaining funds in time to save the deal. 8 months of planning and a potential $4 million profit were evaporating. My cousin Madison was the only family member who sent a different type of message. Good for you. They never respected what you brought to the table. Want to get lunch next week? I actually smiled at that response and texted back, absolutely. Saturday night brought a new wave of calls and messages, but this time it wasn't just family members. Clients had apparently begun hearing rumors and were concerned about their individual accounts. My father had given several people my personal cell number, suggesting they contact me directly about what he called temporary technical difficulties with some accounts. This crossed a serious line by involving outside clients in a family dispute. I spent 3 hours sending carefully worded reassurances to clients, clarifying that their individual investment portfolios were completely separate from the family fund and entirely unaffected. I also noted that I would be happy to discuss their accounts directly on Monday if they had any concerns. I was careful not to criticize the family business or give any indication of internal conflict. These were professional relationships I had built over years, and regardless of what was happening with my family, I maintained my ethical standards. Around midnight, our family attorney, Jonathan, called. Unlike the others, he was calm and professional. Sophia, I've reviewed your withdrawal documentation and everything appears legally sound. However, the timing and execution of this action have created significant operational challenges for family business activities. I understand that, I replied, but as you've confirmed, I've acted within my rights. He paused thoughtfully. Your father has asked me to propose immediate restoration of the funds with a substantially revised leadership role for you within the company. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not making any decisions right now. I'm available to discuss options Monday morning. Another pause. He's also mentioned the possibility of legal action regarding intellectual property and client relationships. Now it was my turn to pause. This was an empty threat, and Jonathan knew it. All my patents and proprietary strategies are registered personally, not with the company. As for client relationships, I'm sure you've reviewed the contracts and noticed the personal service clauses in many of them. But again, I'm happy to discuss everything Monday. He sighed. I'll relay your position. For what it's worth, I've advised against any legal posturing. It wouldn't serve anyone's interests. I agree. Good night, Jonathan. By Sunday morning, the family strategy had shifted to emotional manipulation. My mother left a tearful voicemail about family loyalty and how my grandfather would be disappointed. Aunt Patricia, who had enthusiastically endorsed pushing me out, now sent a lengthy message about how she had always admired my business skills and believed women needed to support each other in finance. Uncle Richard tried a different approach, sending a blunt text suggesting I was overreacting to normal business restructuring and needed to get past my hurt feelings for the good of the family. I spent Sunday preparing for Monday's meeting, organizing all my documentation and planning my discussion points. I wasn't interested in revenge or drama. I simply wanted recognition of my value and respect for my contributions. Sunday evening, my security system alerted me to someone at my door. Through the camera, I saw my father standing there looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His normally perfect shirt was wrinkled, and he seemed to have aged years in just 2 days. I considered not answering, maintaining my Monday morning timeline, but something in his defeated posture moved me. I opened the door, but didn't invite him inside. Sophia, he said, his voice strained, the Richardson deal collapses tomorrow morning if we don't have the funds available. It's $4 million down the drain. I looked at him steadily. That sounds like a business problem requiring a business solution. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm willing to help if we're discussing business, not family emotions. 9 a.m. tomorrow at my office as scheduled. Bring whoever you want from family leadership. He looks like he wanted to push for immediate resolution, but something in my expression told him it would be pointless. 9 a.m., he confirmed, then turned and walked back to his car. I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. For perhaps the first time in my professional life, my father had come to me in need rather than the other way around. Tomorrow would be a completely different kind of family meeting, one where I would set the terms. I slept surprisingly well that night, waking naturally at 6 a.m. instead of jolting awake from stress dreams. By 8:30, my home office was prepared as a conference room, with copies of relevant documents at each seat. I made fresh coffee and arranged a selection of pastries, maintaining professional standards even in this personal confrontation. At 8:57, my security system chimed. They were early, which told me everything about their desperation level. Through the camera, I saw not just my father, but Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, Cousin Brandon, and Attorney Jonathan. The entire family leadership had assembled. At precisely 9 a.m., I opened my front door. My father stood at the front, with the others arranged behind him like some corporate delegation. Their expressions ranged from my father's tense determination to Brandon's poorly concealed hostility to Aunt Patricia's sudden attempt at friendliness. "Please come in," I said simply, stepping aside. They filed into my penthouse, some looking around with obvious surprise at my professionally appointed space. I had never invited family to my personal residence before, and I could see them reassessing as they noticed the original artwork, high-end technology, and luxury furnishings. "The conference room is this way," I directed, leading them to my dining area, which I had converted for our meeting. As they took seats around the table, I remained standing at the head, a position my father typically occupied in family meetings. He noticed immediately, but said nothing as he took a chair to my right. "Coffee?" I offered, maintaining complete professionalism. A few mumbled acceptances, and I calmly served before taking my position at the head of the table. The silence stretched until my father cleared his throat. "Sophia, we're here to resolve this situation quickly, the Richardson deal." I raised my hand, cutting him off with the gesture he had used on me countless times. "Before we discuss any specific transactions, we need to address the fundamental situation. I've withdrawn my contribution from the family fund, as is my right. The bank has confirmed the transaction is proper and should lift the freeze by noon today." "This is absurd," Uncle Richard burst out. "You're holding the family hostage over what? Hurt feelings because we suggested a different role?" I turned to him with the calm I didn't entirely feel. "This isn't about feelings, Uncle Richard. This is about value and recognition. For 7 years, I've generated returns above market average. My division has produced 68% of company profits. My client satisfaction ratings are the highest in the firm. Yet, I was removed from operations via group text without discussion based on alleged feedback that doesn't exist." "We were planning to discuss details at the leadership retreat," Aunt Patricia interjected sweetly. "The retreat I wasn't invited to?" "That was an oversight," my father said quickly. Brandon snorted. "Come on, Sophia, you got your feelings hurt. Did you have to sabotage a major deal over it?" I turned to Brandon, maintaining my composure. "I didn't sabotage anything. I withdrew my personal contribution, which happened to be larger than anyone realized. That reveals the real issue here. You've all been taking my contribution for granted, both financially and professionally." My father leaned forward. "Whatever mistakes we may have made, and I acknowledge there might have been some, this response is extreme. You've jeopardized a $4 million opportunity. An opportunity that apparently couldn't proceed without my money, yet I wasn't consulted about," I noted. Jonathan spoke up diplomatically. "Perhaps we could focus on immediate solutions first, then address longer-term concerns. The Richardson deadline is the most time-sensitive issue." I nodded. "That's reasonable. I'm prepared to wire $6 million to the family fund this morning, sufficient to cover the Richardson down payment with a substantial buffer." Everyone started talking at once, relief evident in their voices, until I raised my hand again.
"However, this will be structured as a loan from my personal holdings to the family fund, with standard market interest rates and specific repayment terms. Jonathan can prepare the documentation immediately."
The relief around the table evaporated. "A loan?" my father asked. "You're going to charge your own family interest?" "This is a business transaction," I replied evenly, "which is how you've always insisted we approach everything at Orley Financial. I'm offering market rate financing on extremely short notice to save a valuable deal. Any other lender would charge significantly higher rates given the time constraints." Jonathan nodded reluctantly. "She's correct. It's actually quite reasonable under the circumstances." Uncle Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is extortion." "No," I corrected. "This is negotiation. The alternative is letting the Richardson deal collapse, which serves no one's interests." My father studied me for a long moment, weighing pride against practicality, emotion against business necessity. "Fine," he finally said. "Jonathan, prepare the loan agreement. But, Sophia, after this crisis passes, we expect you to return to your position and reinvest in the family fund. We can discuss a more appropriate leadership role." I shook my head. That's not available today. The loan for Richardson is a separate matter. My future involvement with Orley Financial and the family fund will require completely new agreements. Aunt Patricia leaned toward me with what she probably thought was a sympathetic expression. Sophia, dear, I understand you're upset. We all say things in anger, but we're family. Yes, we are, I agreed, and family should treat each other with respect. The group message asking me to step back demonstrated exactly how much my contributions are valued. That was poorly handled, my father admitted. I take responsibility. But surely we can move past a single communication error. It wasn't an error, I said quietly. It was the culmination of a pattern that's existed for years. My ideas are dismissed until someone else presents them. My achievements are attributed to team effort, while others are celebrated individually. My professional judgment is questioned despite consistent results. I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. I've brought millions in profit to this family, and in return, I've been treated as an afterthought. That ends today. The room fell silent as the full impact of my words registered. For the first time, I wasn't backing down or smoothing things over. I wasn't accepting empty promises to do better next time. Finally, Brandon broke the silence with a dismissive laugh. This is all very dramatic, but let's be realistic. You need the Sterling name and connections as much as we need your number crunching. Where exactly do you think you're going? That was precisely the opening I had been waiting for. I smiled at Brandon's challenge and pressed a button on a small remote. The large television mounted on the wall lit up with a presentation I had prepared. The first slide displayed a logo I had designed, Sophia Sterling Capital Management. I've been operating my own investment firm as a separate entity for the past 5 years. I explained, advancing to the next slide, which showed impressive growth charts. My independent clients have enjoyed average returns of 19% compared to the 11% at Orley Financial. The shocked expressions around the table were deeply satisfying. Uncle Richard's mouth actually fell open. That's impossible, my father said. You've been working full-time at our firm. When would you have had time to build another business? Evenings, weekends, the vacation days I rarely took. While everyone else was at the lake house or traveling to Europe, I was building something of my own. Aunt Patricia's friendly facade cracked. This is a clear violation of your employment contract. You can't compete with the family business. I slid a document across the table to Jonathan. My employment contract specifically permits personal investment activities as long as they don't directly solicit Orley Financial clients. I've adhered to that completely. Jonathan skimmed the document and nodded with obvious reluctance. She's technically correct. The clause was intended for personal stock trading, but it's broadly written. I advanced to the next slide showing a list of patents. I also hold 9 patents for financial algorithms and trading systems, all registered to me personally, not Orley Financial. Those were developed while you worked for us, my father argued, though uncertainty had entered his voice. They were developed on my own time using my own resources. I've maintained detailed documentation establishing that the patents are legally mine. The next slide displayed a client roster, a carefully curated collection of names, none of whom were current Orley Financial clients. I've built relationships with 32 high net worth clients completely separate from our family business. Their combined assets under my management total just over $520 million. Brandon let out a low whistle despite himself. Furthermore, I said, moving to another slide, 19 current Orley Financial clients have personal service agreements specifically with me. I handed copies of these contracts to Jonathan. These agreements include clauses stating that if I leave the firm, they have the option to transfer their accounts to follow me. Jonathan reviewed the documents with growing alarm. These are standard personal service provisions. Many affluent clients insist on them to ensure continuity with their preferred advisor. My father looked stricken. How many of our clients have these agreements? Clients representing approximately $310 million in assets, I replied evenly. The room fell into stunned silence as everyone processed the implications. Not only had I built a successful independent business, but I could potentially take nearly half of Arlie Financial's client base with me if I chose to leave. "When did you plan all this?" Aunt Patricia asked, her sweetness completely evaporated. "I didn't plan it as a strategy against the family," I said honestly. "I started building my separate business because I realized years ago that regardless of what I contributed, I would never be fully respected at Arlie Financial. It was self-preservation, not sabotage." I advanced to a final slide showing a performance comparison between Arlie Financial and my own firm over the past 5 years. The difference was stark and undeniable. "I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone," I said, softening my tone slightly. "I'm sharing it to demonstrate that I've earned the right to be taken seriously. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the recognition my results deserve." My father stared at the screen, then back at me. For the first time in my professional life, I saw something new in his eyes, respect mixed with genuine regret. "What do you want, Sophia?" he asked quietly. "First, we complete the loan agreement for Richardson to address the immediate crisis. Second, I take a 30-day leave of absence from Arlie Financial to give everyone time to consider next steps. Third, we reconvene in 1 month to discuss either my return under completely new terms or my formal departure and transition of my client relationships." I looked around the table. Those are my non-negotiables. Jonathan spoke up carefully. "From a legal perspective, these are reasonable requests given the circumstances. I would strongly advise accepting them." Uncle Richard looked like he wanted to argue further, but my father raised a hand to silence him, a gesture I had seen countless times in family meetings, but never directed at one of the senior members. "We accept your terms," my father said firmly. "Jonathan will prepare the loan agreement immediately and formalize your leave of absence today." Brandon started to protest, but my father cut him off sharply. "Enough, Brandon. The situation has fundamentally changed, and we need to adapt accordingly." As Jonathan began drafting the loan document on his laptop, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. I could see various family members processing this new reality where I held significant power they had never known existed. Aunt Patricia, ever the political opportunist, was the first to adjust her approach. "Sophia, I've always said you were the most talented financial mind in our family. I'm eager to see what leadership role you might assume when you return." The insincerity was almost comical, but I simply nodded politely. Within 90 minutes, the loan agreement was finalized and signed. I initiated the transfer immediately. The Richardson deal would proceed, saving the family from an embarrassing and costly failure. As everyone prepared to leave, my father lingered behind. When we were alone, he looked around my penthouse with new understanding, taking in the success I had built independently. "I underestimated you," he said finally. "I've been doing it your entire life, haven't I?" I didn't answer directly. "The family meeting in 30 days will be an opportunity for a fresh start, one way or another." He nodded, looking suddenly older and weary. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, even if I haven't shown it properly." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. But I needed that recognition years ago, not after I was forced to prove my worth this way. He accepted the truth of my words with another nod, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Your grandfather would have been impressed. He valued results and determination above everything else." After everyone left, I sat alone at my dining room looking at the remnants of our meeting. coffee cups, scattered papers, the lingering tension in the air. For years, I had imagined a confrontation where I finally stood up for myself, but the reality had been both more clinical and more emotional than I had anticipated. Whatever happened in the next 30 days, the dynamics had been permanently altered. I had finally claimed my own value, and no one, not even my father, could dismiss it again. The 30 days of my leave of absence passed more swiftly than I had anticipated. I focused intensively on my independent business, working with my small but talented team to prepare for every possible outcome of the upcoming family meeting. If we needed to absorb transferred clients from Arley Financial, we had comprehensive systems in place. If we were to create some hybrid arrangement with the family business, we had detailed proposals ready. I also took genuine time for myself for the first time in years. I spent weekends hiking in Wisconsin, had dinners with non-family friends, and even began dating again, something I had completely neglected while building my parallel career. There was a lightness to my days that had been missing for too long. The crushing weight of constantly seeking approval had lifted from my shoulders. My cousin Madison and I met for coffee several times during this period. Away from the oppressive family dynamics, she shared her own frustrations and dreams. She had an interior design degree she had never been allowed to use, as the family had pressured her into the marketing department at Arley Financial, despite her complete lack of interest or aptitude. "Watching you stand up to them gave me real courage," she told me during one of our conversations. "I've started interviewing with design firms. I haven't told anyone else in the family yet." "They'll try to talk you out of it," I warned her. She smiled with newfound confidence. "I know, but I've seen what's actually possible now." I received occasional updates from Jonathan about the family business operations. The loan had successfully saved the Richardson deal, which was proceeding ahead of schedule. My father had implemented several of my previously rejected strategies with remarkably positive early results. Various family members had been making careful overtures through Jonathan, testing the waters for our upcoming meeting. The most interesting development was that Brandon had apparently been struggling to manage the client accounts he had inherited from me. 3 clients had already called requesting my direct contact information, and 2 others had expressed dissatisfaction with the transition of their portfolios. When the day finally arrived, I chose a neutral location, a private room at an exclusive Chicago restaurant, rather than either my home or the family offices. I arrived early to ensure the setup matched my vision, a round table rather than rectangular, eliminating the head position my father traditionally occupied. They arrived as a unified group again, but the energy was completely different from our last confrontation. Gone was the aggressive posturing. My father led with subdued confidence, Uncle Richard seemed resigned rather than angry, and Aunt Patricia had abandoned her false warmth for careful neutrality. Brandon looked uncomfortable but controlled, and Jonathan maintained his professional demeanor. 2 additions surprised me: my mother, who rarely attended business meetings, and my cousin Madison. After everyone was seated and initial pleasantries exchanged, my father opened the discussion with obvious care. "Sophia, over the past month, we've had extensive time to consider the situation thoroughly. The family and the business have benefited from your contributions in ways we fail to properly recognize. We would like to propose a new arrangement that acknowledges your value while preserving the family legacy we all care about." He nodded to Jonathan, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. "We're proposing a fundamental restructuring of Orley Financial," my father continued. "The creation of a new autonomous division, Sterling Capital Management, with you as president and chief executive officer. This division would have complete autonomy over investment strategies and client relationships, with its own profit-sharing structure separate from traditional family distributions." I opened the folder and reviewed the proposal as he spoke. The terms were surprisingly comprehensive and favorable: substantial ownership stake, genuine decision-making authority, and compensation tied directly to performance rather than family politics. Additionally, my father said, we're proposing significant changes to the family fund structure. Each contributor would have proportional voting rights based on their actual investment rather than the current system where all family members have equal influence regardless of contribution. This was a major concession, a direct acknowledgement of the power imbalance that had existed for years. What about my existing independent business? I asked. We're proposing a merger, Jonathan explained carefully. Your clients and patents would be incorporated into the new division with specific legal protections for your intellectual property rights. All client service agreements would remain intact with you as the primary advisor. I considered the proposal thoughtfully. And future leadership succession. The same issues could arise again down the road. My father nodded seriously. The restructuring includes a merit-based succession plan for all divisions. Leadership positions will be determined by performance metrics and client outcomes, not seniority or family relationships. It was a comprehensive proposal addressing virtually all of my concerns. The family had clearly invested serious effort during my absence. Uncle Richard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up with obvious difficulty. I want to acknowledge something directly, Sophia. I've been dismissive of your approaches because they weren't how we've traditionally operated. The results speak for themselves, and I was wrong to resist changes that clearly benefit our clients. Coming from my uncle, this was equivalent to a complete reversal of his worldview. Aunt Patricia added with apparent sincerity, the family business needs to evolve with changing times. Your generation brings perspectives we need to embrace, not resist. Brandon shifted uncomfortably before adding, I've learned considerable amount reviewing your client strategies over the past month. There's a depth to your approach that I hadn't fully understood before. These admissions, while clearly difficult for them, demonstrated a significant shift in family dynamics. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly, a simple gesture of support that meant more than she probably realized. I appreciate everyone's willingness to reconsider our working relationship comprehensively, I said carefully. I'll review the proposal in detail and respond within 1 week. As the meeting concluded, Madison caught my eye with a small smile of encouragement. Whatever I decided, I knew I at least had one family member who truly understood what this moment represented. The following week involved intensive analysis of the proposal with my team and independent legal counsel. There were detailed negotiations on specific terms, clarifications of authority boundaries, and comprehensive discussions about integrating my existing business operations. After careful consideration, I accepted a modified version of the family's proposal. The new division was established with even stronger autonomy provisions than originally offered. My independent business was successfully merged in, and I assumed a leadership role that genuinely reflected my contributions and capabilities. My personal investments returned to the family fund, but under the new proportional voting structure that ensured my voice would be commensurate with my substantial contribution. The transition wasn't seamless. Old habits occasionally resurged, my father instinctively trying to override my decisions, Brandon attempting to claim credit in client meetings, and Aunt Patricia making subtle undermining comments during presentations. But now there were formal structures in place to address these issues systematically. More importantly, I had definitively proven my willingness to walk away if necessary. Over the following year, Sterling Capital Management outperformed every other division of the family business by substantial margins. New clients were attracted by our innovative approaches and superior results, while existing clients benefited from significantly enhanced returns. The Richardson deal that had sparked the original crisis ultimately generated $6.2 million in profits, well above initial projections. My cousin Madison eventually left Orly Financial to pursue her interior design passion with my full support and a strategic investment from me in her new firm. Within 18 months, her company was designing offices for several major Chicago corporations. Family dynamics shifted gradually, but permanently. My father and I developed a genuinely collaborative relationship based on mutual professional respect rather than the patronizing parent-child dynamic that had undermined us for years. Some family members adapted more successfully than others, but all recognized that the business was demonstrably stronger because of the changes we had implemented. One evening, nearly a year after the group message that had triggered everything, my father and I were working late reviewing quarterly results that showed record-breaking performance across all divisions. "I've been thinking about your grandfather lately," he said unexpectedly. When he handed the business to me, he said something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said, "The best legacy isn't preservation, it's evolution." I think I finally understand what he meant. I looked at my father thoughtfully. Evolution requires admitting that the original form might not be perfect. He nodded slowly. Pride makes that admission difficult. I was so focused on maintaining what he built that I resisted changes that would have made it significantly better. He smiled with genuine warmth, even when those changes came from the person most committed to the business's success. "It's never too late to evolve," I said. The journey from being undervalued to being genuinely respected hadn't come easily. It had required building substantial leverage, being willing to walk away from everything, and ultimately forcing a confrontation I would have preferred to avoid entirely. But the outcome wasn't just better for me personally. It was better for the entire family and the business we had all dedicated ourselves to building. The most valuable lesson wasn't about finance or business strategy. It was simpler and more universal. Respect isn't automatically given based on family relationships or good intentions. It must sometimes be claimed through actions and consequences. Worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it, but by your own knowledge of your value and your willingness to stand firm in that knowledge, even when it's uncomfortable or risky. 6 months later, I received a message that brought everything full circle. It was from a young woman named Emily who worked at a family business in Seattle. She had heard about my story through professional networks and reached out for advice. "I'm in a similar situation," she wrote. "My family doesn't take my contributions seriously despite consistent results. I've been building my own safety net, but I'm scared to make the final move. How did you know it was the right time?" I spent considerable time crafting my response, remembering how isolated I had felt during my own struggle. The right time is when you realize that seeking their approval is costing you more than losing their approval would. When you understand that your worth isn't dependent on their recognition, you're ready to claim it for yourself. 3 months later, Emily sent me an update. She had successfully negotiated a completely new arrangement with her family business, with terms that reflected her actual value rather than their assumptions about her role. "Thank you for showing me it was possible," she said. That message reminded me why the entire ordeal had been worthwhile. Sometimes standing up for yourself creates ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate situation. Sometimes claiming your own value gives others permission to claim theirs as well. 2 years after the family crisis that changed everything, Sterling Capital Management had become the crown jewel of Arley Financial. Our division was generating 73% of total company revenues, and we had been featured in Financial Planning magazine as one of the most innovative wealth management firms in the Midwest. The transformation went deeper than just numbers. The entire family business culture had evolved. Merit-based evaluations replaced favoritism. Transparent communication replaced behind-the-scenes politicking. Results-driven decision-making replaced relationship-based assumptions. Brandon had initially struggled with the new performance standards, but eventually found his niche in client relationship management rather than strategic planning. Once he stopped competing with me and started focusing on his actual strength, he became a valuable team member. Our working relationship, while never warm, became genuinely professional and productive. Uncle Richard had retired early, choosing to step back rather than adapt to the new merit-based culture. Aunt Patricia remained on the board, but with significantly reduced influence, her voting power now proportional to her minimal financial contribution. She had learned to contribute constructively rather than simply taking credit for others' work. My mother had surprised everyone by becoming one of the strongest advocates for the new structure. During a family board meeting, she had spoken passionately about how the changes had made the business stronger and more sustainable for future generations. We were so focused on preserving tradition that we nearly destroyed what my father-in-law actually built. He would have embraced these innovations because he understood that businesses must evolve to survive. Perhaps the most meaningful change was in my relationship with my father. We had developed a genuine partnership based on complementary strengths. He handled major client relationships and strategic partnerships, while I focused on investment innovation and operational excellence. Our monthly one-on-one meetings had become collaborative planning sessions rather than patronizing lectures. During one of these meetings, 18 months after our confrontation, he made an observation that stayed with me. "You know what I've learned from all this?" he said, reviewing our quarterly performance reports. "I was so worried about maintaining control that I was actually limiting our potential. The moment I started trusting your judgment instead of questioning it, everything improved." He looked up from the reports. "I spent years trying to teach you the business when I should have been learning from you." Madison's interior design firm had grown into a thriving enterprise with 12 employees and offices in both Chicago and Milwaukee. She had recently been commissioned to design the new headquarters for a major technology company, a contract worth over $2 million. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't shown me it was possible to say no to family expectations," she told me during a celebration dinner for her latest success. The ripple effects extended beyond our immediate family. 3 other women in similar situations had reached out to me for guidance after hearing about our story through professional networks. Each had successfully negotiated better arrangements with their family businesses by building independent leverage and being willing to walk away. One of them, a lawyer named Rachel, whose family firm had been undervaluing her for a decade, sent me a message that particularly resonated. "You showed me that loyalty shouldn't be a one-way street. Family businesses need to earn the dedication of talented family members, not just assume it." But perhaps the most important long-term impact was personal. I had learned to value my own worth independently of external validation. The constant need for approval that had driven me for years had been replaced by quiet confidence in my abilities and contributions. I still worked hard and cared deeply about results, but I no longer defined my self-worth by whether my family recognized my achievements. That internal shift had made me a better leader, a better business partner, and honestly, a happier person. The financial success continued to compound. My personal net worth had grown to over $35 million, built through a combination of business ownership, strategic investments, and the performance bonuses tied to our division's exceptional results. More importantly, I had built something sustainable. Sterling Capital Management wasn't dependent on my presence alone. I had developed a talented team, established robust systems, and created a culture of excellence that would continue regardless of my individual involvement. The business model we had created at Sterling Capital Management began attracting attention from other family enterprises. We started consulting with family businesses across the country, helping them implement merit-based structures and navigate generational transitions more effectively. "You've turned your personal crisis into a professional expertise," my father observed during one of our strategic planning sessions. "That's exactly the kind of transformation your grandfather would have admired." As I reflected on the journey from that humiliating group message to this position of genuine respect and influence, I realized that the confrontation had been necessary, not just for me, but for everyone involved. My family had needed to learn that talent and contribution matter more than assumptions and traditions. They had needed to understand that respect must be earned, not demanded based on relationships or hierarchy. I had needed to learn that I couldn't wait for others to recognize my value. I had to be willing to claim it myself, even when that meant risking everything I had worked to build. The lesson that emerged wasn't about revenge or family conflict. It was about the courage to insist on being valued appropriately, the wisdom to build independent security, and the strength to walk away from situations that don't serve your growth. Most importantly, it was about understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people who undervalue you is to stop accepting that treatment. Sometimes forcing people to confront the consequences of their behavior is what creates the opportunity for genuine change and growth. Today, 5 years after that group message changed everything, I'm sitting in my corner office at Sterling Capital Management, looking out at the Chicago skyline and reflecting on how dramatically life can transform when you finally decide to value yourself properly. Sterling Capital Management now oversees $1.2 billion in client assets. We have expanded to offices in Milwaukee and Indianapolis, with plans for a Denver location next year. Our client satisfaction ratings remain at 97%, and our average returns continue to outperform industry standards by substantial margins. The family fund, restructured under the new proportional system, has grown to $42 million. My contribution represents nearly 40% of the total, and my voting power reflects that investment. Family meetings are now productive collaborative sessions rather than exercises in frustration and dismissal. Last month, I was invited to speak at the National Conference of Family Business Enterprises on succession planning and merit-based governance. The audience included hundreds of family business leaders grappling with similar challenges to what we had faced. The biggest mistake family businesses make is assuming that family loyalty automatically translates to business competence, or that emotional relationships can substitute for professional standards. After the presentation, a young man approached me with tears in his eyes. He said, "You just described my exact situation. I've been trying to prove myself for 8 years while watching less qualified relatives get promoted ahead of me. I thought I was going crazy." That conversation reminded me why sharing this story matters. Countless talented people are trapped in family dynamics that undervalue their contributions. They need to know that change is possible, but it requires courage and strategic thinking. Brandon, surprisingly, has become one of our most effective team members. Once he stopped competing with me and embraced his strengths and relationship management, he found genuine success and satisfaction. He recently told me, "I was so focused on trying to be you that I forgot to be good at being me." Madison's interior design firm was acquired last year by a national design corporation for $12 million. She stayed on as creative director and now oversees projects across the Midwest. She sends me a photo every few months from whatever city she's working in, always with the caption, "Living my actual dreams." Aunt Patricia retired from the board 2 years ago, choosing to focus on volunteer work rather than adapt to our performance-based culture. Surprisingly, we've developed a cordial relationship now that business competition is no longer between us. She recently admitted, "I spent so many years feeling threatened by your competence that I forgot to appreciate it." Uncle Richard moved to Florida and seems much happier in retirement. He sends occasional emails about his golf game and fishing expeditions, a stark contrast to his former stress about business decisions he wasn't qualified to make. My father and I have traveled together to industry conferences, appeared jointly on financial planning podcasts, and collaborated on an article about family business governance that was published in Harvard Business Review. Our professional partnership has become something I never thought possible during those years of feeling dismissed and undervalued. "You know what I'm most proud of," he said during our most recent planning retreat? "Not just that the business is more successful, but that it's honest. We're finally operating according to actual merit rather than assumptions in politics." The personal growth has been equally significant. I'm engaged to Marcus, a software entrepreneur I met at a technology conference 18 months ago. He has never known me as anything other than a confident business leader, which has been refreshing and healing in ways I didn't expect. You talk about your family business like you genuinely enjoy working with them. He observed early in our relationship. That's not how most people describe family enterprises. It took work to get to this point, but the relationships are now authentic rather than performative. The financial success has provided security and options I never had before. My net worth has grown to over $50 million, built through business ownership, strategic investments, and the compound returns from years of disciplined saving and investing. But the most valuable outcome isn't the money or professional recognition. It's the knowledge that I have the strength to advocate for myself when necessary, the wisdom to build independent security, and the confidence to walk away from situations that don't serve my growth. The lessons from this experience extend far beyond family businesses. Whether you're dealing with workplace dynamics, romantic relationships, friendships, or any situation where you feel undervalued, the principles remain the same. Build your own security and options so that you're negotiating from strength rather than desperation. Document your contributions and be prepared to demonstrate your value objectively. Set clear boundaries and be willing to enforce them even when it's uncomfortable. Remember that respect is earned through consistent behavior, not granted through relationships or good intentions. Most importantly, understand that your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition of it. You have the right to insist on being valued appropriately, and sometimes that requires making people face the consequences of undervaluing you. The group message that started this entire journey now serves as a reminder on my office wall, printed and framed. We think it's best if you step back from operations for now. Below it, I've added my own note. Sometimes stepping back is exactly what you need to do to move forward. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for your own value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and claiming your worth. Remember, the most powerful thing you can sometimes do is simply honor your own value, especially when others don't yet see it. You have the right to insist on being valued appropriately, and sometimes that requires making people face the consequences of undervaluing you. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you the courage to claim your own worth, whatever situation you're facing. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than settling for being undervalued.